I always thought weddings were supposed to be the happiest day of your life. You're surrounded by love, family, friends, and this huge sense of stepping into a new beginning. But mine? It began with a punch. Not metaphorically, I mean literally. My dad punched my mom right before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. I remember the sound. It was sharp, like someone slapping a book shut. I didn't even register what had happened at first. I just stood there, frozen, veil in my hand, lipstick half done, watching the man who was supposed to walk me down the aisle throw his fist at the woman who raised me. My maid of honor screamed. My uncle tried to step in. My mom, still in her dress, still holding her purse, was crumpled in the corner, holding her face, saying it was fine. It's fine, let's just get through today. It wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. And in that exact moment, I had to make a decision. Do I cancel the wedding, pretend nothing happened, or go through with it, completely alone? I thought back to everything I'd been through with my parents. How much we'd all sacrificed to make this day happen. How hard I tried to keep the peace. How many red flags I ignored just to believe we could be a normal family. Before I tell you what I chose, you need to understand what led to this. Because if you knew my dad, charming, successful, respected, you'd never expect him to do something like this. But behind the perfect family photos and polite smiles, something darker was always simmering underneath. So let me take you back to the day before the wedding. The day before the wedding was supposed to be simple. Hair trials, last-minute dress fitting, dinner with the bridal party. But from the moment I woke up, I felt this weird tightness in my chest. Like something was off, and I didn't know what. My dad had been acting strange. Not angry. Not loud. Just cold. Distant. Like he was there physically but somewhere else mentally. He barely looked at me during breakfast. Barely spoke to my mom when she reminded him to pick up the wine for the rehearsal dinner. He just grunted. That was it. I chalked it up to stress. Everyone gets wedding stress, right? But that afternoon, things escalated. We were doing the rehearsal walk at the venue. The bridesmaids were giggling, my fiancé was beaming, and for a split second, everything felt perfect. Then, my dad pulled me aside. He told me, in a low voice, that he thought I was making a mistake. I thought he was joking, nervous dad stuff. But no, he said, he's not good enough for you. And I don't support this marriage. I laughed. I actually laughed at first. I thought it was some last-minute nerves or maybe some weird dad control thing. But then he said something that stopped me cold. If you go through with this, don't expect me to pretend to be happy. I was stunned. My mom tried to pull him away before it became a scene. He yanked his arm out of her grasp, and for a split second, I saw it, that look in his eyes. That sharp, angry glare I remembered from when I was a teenager. The one he used when slamming doors and punching walls. He had worked so hard to seem like the perfect dad these last few years. Apologized for the past. Swore he changed. And for a while, I believed him. But that moment cracked it open. Later that evening, my mom sat me down. She said he hadn't been sleeping. That he was drinking again. That he had been picking fights with her behind closed doors. I asked her why she hadn't told me. She just looked at me and said, because I didn't want to ruin your day. I felt this wave of guilt. Like it was somehow my fault. Like if I had chosen a simpler venue, or eloped, or asked less of everyone, maybe none of this would have happened. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't about stress. It wasn't about weddings. It was about control. It always had been. My mom had spent years smoothing over his outbursts. Making excuses. Keeping the peace. She was so used to protecting me from it that she didn't even realize how much she was still protecting him. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed that night, staring at my wedding dress hanging near the window. It looked so peaceful, glowing in the soft yellow light. Like it belonged to a different version of me, one who didn't have to worry about whether her dad would explode tomorrow. I wanted that version back. So badly. But deep down, I knew tomorrow was going to test me in ways I couldn't imagine. I just didn't realize how far it would go. The morning of my wedding, I woke up before the sun. I didn't sleep much, maybe 2 hours, tops. My mind had been spinning all night, running through every possible version of the day ahead. What if Dad refused to show up? What if he did show up and caused a scene? What if I couldn't go through with it at all? But when I looked in the mirror, I smiled. It was my wedding day. I deserved to feel happy, even if just for a few hours. The bridal suite was already buzzing when I arrived. Hair curlers were everywhere, makeup bags unzipped, coffee cups scattered. My bridesmaids were in high spirits, playing music and hyping me up like nothing was wrong. They didn't know what had happened the day before. Only my maid of honor, my best friend since middle school, knew everything. She'd stayed with me that night and hadn't left my side since. The look she gave me that morning said it all. "Are you okay? Are you sure you want to do this?" I nodded. And I did want to do it. Not just for the guests, or the effort, or the pretty dress. I wanted to marry the man waiting for me at the end of that aisle. He didn't know the full story either, just that my dad and I had some tension. I didn't want this drama to become his problem too. Around mid-morning, my mom stopped by the suite. She looked pale, worn out. She smiled at me and tried to act normal, but I saw her hand trembling when she reached for her coffee. I asked her quietly if she was okay. She whispered, "He's quiet, trying to stay out of the way. I think he knows he went too far yesterday." I wanted to believe that. I really did, but I didn't trust it. He'd been quiet before. That's when he was most dangerous. I told my mom she didn't have to put on a face today, that she didn't owe him anything. She just nodded, kissed my forehead, and left. As noon approached, tension started creeping back in. My stomach twisted every time my phone buzzed. I kept expecting a message. An emergency. A meltdown. Instead, there was nothing. Too quiet. The photographer arrived and asked for a photo of me and my dad. I froze. I told her we'd do it later. Maybe. My dress went on. My makeup was flawless. Everything looked perfect. People were laughing and complimenting me and talking about the cake and flowers like nothing else existed. But in the back of my mind, I was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. My dad hadn't shown up to the suite. He hadn't texted. He hadn't knocked. I sent my uncle to check on him. 10 minutes later, he came back. He looked shaken. "He's in a bad mood," he said. "Just stay up here for now." I felt my heart sink. I asked, "Is he drinking?" My uncle hesitated, then nodded slowly. It was like my entire body went cold. We were 30 minutes away from the ceremony. And somehow, I knew. Something was going to break. The ceremony was set to begin at 2 p.m. By 1:30, guests were being ushered into the garden. String quartet playing softly, flowers rustling in the breeze. Everything looked picture perfect. Except me. I was still upstairs, pacing the bridal suite in full makeup and a gown that suddenly felt like it was weighing me down. No word from my dad. I kept checking my phone, even though I hadn't heard a single buzz in over an hour. My uncle was avoiding eye contact. My mom had gone silent. My bridesmaids were trying to keep the vibe light, but the tension in the room was thick. Then, at 1:42, everything snapped. A scream echoed from down the hall. Then a loud bang, like something, or someone, had hit a wall. I ripped open the door and ran barefoot down the carpeted corridor. The hall was empty, but voices were coming from the groom's suite. I turned the corner and saw them. My dad, towering over my mom. She was backed into a corner, holding her arm like she'd already been grabbed. "You lied to me," he spat. "You told me she was having second thoughts." "You said, stop it," my mom said, voice shaking. "Not today. Please, not today." He raised his hand. And before I could even scream, it came down. Hard. Right across her face. It wasn't a shove. It wasn't a slap. It was a closed fist, fast, brutal, unhinged. I lunged forward and screamed, "What are you doing?" He turned to look at me, and for a second, it was like he didn't recognize me. Just blank rage. Red eyes. Flared nostrils. Then, like a switch, his face changed. He dropped his hand. Backed away. "You weren't supposed to see that," he mumbled. But I had. And so had my uncle, my maid of honor, and one of the staff members who had come running from downstairs. My mom was crouched on the floor, clutching her cheek, dazed but still conscious. Her eye was already starting to swell. I knelt next to her. "Are you okay? Mom, talk to me, are you okay?" She nodded weakly. "It's okay. I'm okay. Just, please don't cancel. Don't let him ruin this for you." But I couldn't think straight. Everything blurred. The flowers. The music. The dress. The dream I had since I was 12. None of it mattered. I looked up at my dad. He was standing there, breathing hard, still in his tux, still pretending like he had any right to be a part of this. "You need to leave," I said. He didn't move. "Now," I said louder. "You're not walking me down the aisle. You're not even staying. You're done." He started to speak. I lost control. "It was a mistake. She provoked me." That's when my uncle stepped in. He got between us, shoved my dad back and told him if he didn't leave immediately, the police would be involved. That the hotel had security footage. That this wasn't going to disappear like it used to. For once, my dad listened. He stormed off, slamming a door so hard it shook the floor. A minute later, I heard a car screech out of the parking lot. Silence. And then, I started shaking. My best friend helped me stand. My mom insisted she was okay. But I knew she wasn't. None of us were. We had 10 minutes until the ceremony. I stepped into the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My mascara was intact, but my soul felt cracked. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to steady my breath. I whispered to myself, "You don't need him. You never did." And in that moment, I made a choice. I was going to walk down that aisle. Not because everything was fine, but because I refused to let him take any more from me. Not my moment. Not my strength. Not my life. The next 10 minutes felt like both an eternity and a blur. Everyone was asking me what to do. Should we postpone? Should we call it off? Should we wait an hour? My coordinator was gently suggesting options like taking a moment or adjusting the schedule. But I wasn't in shock anymore. I was clear. I sat down next to my mom, who was now icing her cheek with a hotel napkin filled with ice cubes. She looked at me and whispered, "You don't have to do this today. Everyone will understand." And she was right. But I looked back at her, really looked, and I realized something. I'd spent my whole life waiting for moments to feel perfect, for everyone to behave, for things to go according to plan. But life doesn't work that way. It's messy, ugly, raw, and real. And I didn't want my father to be the reason I delayed something beautiful. So I stood up. I told my coordinator, "Start the music." She blinked. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "But I'm walking alone." It was like the air changed. Everyone froze. I could see people processing what that meant. That my dad, the man who was supposed to be my escort, my protector, had done the exact opposite. That I wasn't just choosing to continue the ceremony. I was reclaiming it. My best friend hugged me tighter than she ever had. She whispered, "You are the strongest bride I've ever seen." I walked with my head high to the staircase. Alone. My hands were trembling slightly, but my steps were firm. As I reached the edge of the garden where everyone was seated, the guests turned around. A few jaws dropped. Some murmured. Some immediately glanced around, confused. Where was the father of the bride? I didn't care. I kept walking. Step by step, down the aisle. No arm to lean on. No one to give me away. Because I wasn't being given away. I was choosing. And when I locked eyes with my soon-to-be husband, whose expression changed from confusion to concern to pride in a matter of seconds, I knew I'd made the right choice. He didn't need to ask. He knew. When I reached him, he took both my hands and whispered, "I've got you." And I finally let myself breathe. Later, people would come up to me and say things like, "That was the most powerful moment I've ever witnessed at a wedding." Some cried. Some just hugged me tightly. Even people I barely knew said, "You didn't just walk, you owned that aisle." I wasn't trying to make a statement. But maybe I did. Maybe, in choosing to walk alone, I reminded myself, and others, that strength doesn't come from tradition or appearances. It comes from standing up after something breaks, and still moving forward. When the music started, I felt every eye turn toward me. There was no announcement. No "please rise." No introduction. Just me, standing at the start of the aisle, bouquet in hand, heart pounding. I took my first step. It felt heavier than I expected. Like I wasn't just walking toward a marriage, I was walking through everything that had just happened. Every moment of chaos, every ounce of heartbreak, every version of me that thought she needed her father's approval to be whole. And as I kept walking, something inside me shifted. The silence of the crowd wasn't uncomfortable. It was reverent. Like they understood, even if they didn't know exactly what happened, that this wasn't a normal walk down the aisle. This was a woman reclaiming her story. Every step became lighter. My bouquet no longer felt like a prop. It felt like a trophy, a symbol of survival. Halfway down, I saw my mom, seated in the front row with her face slightly turned. Her eye was swollen, but she was holding it together, strong and proud. She mouthed the words, "I love you." I mouthed back, "Thank you." In that moment, I felt connected to something deeper than tradition. I wasn't just walking down an aisle. I was walking into a new chapter, one that I was choosing, freely, consciously, and without shame. People talk a lot about fairy tale weddings, the perfect entrance, the proud father, the smiling bride gliding across the aisle like she's weightless. But this was something else. It was real, and powerful, and unforgettable. I could see tears in the eyes of a few guests. Some had their hands over their hearts. Even the officiant looked moved, as if he too was witnessing something sacred. The wind picked up just slightly. My veil danced behind me. And with every step, I felt like I was shedding a version of myself I didn't need anymore, the girl who stayed quiet, who tolerated toxicity, who tried to make everyone happy at her own expense. By the time I reached the end of the aisle, I was steady. My fiancé took both my hands and whispered, "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." I smiled, not a forced, bridal smile, but a real one. One that said, I made it. I wasn't broken. I wasn't abandoned. I wasn't weak. I was walking into my future, on my own terms. And even though I walked alone, I didn't feel alone at all. The ceremony went on. It was simple, honest, emotional. We said our vows, exchanged rings, and when the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," I felt this wave of release wash over me, like I'd finally broken free of something I didn't even realize had been holding me down for years. When we turned to face the guests, the applause was thunderous. Not just polite or expected. It felt like a collective exhale, like everyone had been holding their breath with me. At the reception, things were different. There was no father-daughter dance. No toast from the father of the bride. No funny childhood stories or emotional speech from a man holding back tears. Instead, there was this quiet understanding. People didn't ask questions. They just showed support in the ways they knew how: hugs, kind words, a little extra warmth in their smiles. Even people I didn't know that well offered knowing glances that felt like, "We saw. We support you." My best friend gave a beautiful speech. She talked about strength, about resilience, about choosing love not just in a relationship, but in yourself. She said, today, she walked alone. But not because she was abandoned, because she is enough on her own. It was the only moment I cried. My mom stayed by my side most of the night. She wore sunglasses, even indoors, but she never left early. She even danced with me during what should have been the father-daughter song. She whispered, "I may not be him, but I'm always going to show up for you." And that meant more than any speech ever could. As for my dad, I didn't hear from him that night, or the next day. No apology, no explanation. He disappeared the way cowards often do, quickly and quietly, after causing the most noise. A few weeks later, he sent an email. It was short, cold, something about how he hoped I enjoyed the show, and how I humiliated him. I didn't reply. I blocked him. And it wasn't because I was angry, even though I was. It was because I finally understood something my mom had tried to teach me for years: love without respect isn't love. It's manipulation, control, fear dressed up as care. And I was done pretending. Because that day didn't just mark the beginning of my marriage. It marked the end of me tolerating anyone who thought love and violence could coexist. Looking back now, I realize that walking alone wasn't a moment of loss, it was a declaration of self. I didn't lose a father that day. I found myself. I found a version of me who no longer needs approval from people who hurt her, who no longer apologizes for taking up space, who no longer sacrifices peace for appearances. I wish the story had a softer ending. I wish my father had been the man I used to imagine he could be. But I'm no longer holding space for fantasy versions of people who refuse to grow. I married the love of my life that day. But I also divorced the fear I'd been carrying since I was a little girl. To anyone watching this who feels like they're stuck in the middle of someone else's chaos, I want you to know that walking alone isn't weakness. It's freedom. And if you've ever had to choose between pleasing others and protecting your peace, I hope you choose you, every single time. Thanks for hearing my story. If it helped you or moved you in any way, please like the video and subscribe for more real stories like this. You're not alone.